World Motivational Speaker Competition. A massive round of applause for her, please.
Thank you. Now, would you agree with me that we live in an ever-changing world? Yes?
Yes.
Or no?
Yes.
Now, I've been involved within the medical industry and more recently within the wellness industry for many years, and I've seen a lot of changes. And I've also met a lot of people. But today, I'd like to introduce you to just one of them. And her name is Jean. Now, Jean was a lady that was born in South Devon. She was a tiny little lady with a very smiley face and the crinkliest of curly hair. And apparently she used to iron it on an ironing board before she would go out dancing with her friends. Now, when she was in her 20s, she met and married Bill. Bill was from the other end of the country. He was from Scotland. And he was a very typical Scot with a pale face and very dark black hair. This is Jean and Bill in their kitchen one day. Bill, I wish you'd come and sit down and have a cup of tea. Look, you haven't spoken to me for 3 days and I think the boys are beginning to notice. Look, we agreed that this change that we've made here was going to be for the best. I enjoyed living in Scotland with your mum and your brothers, but it was really crowded. We've got our own house here. The boys have got their room and we've got room for the baby on the way. And the doctor said it was definitely going to be better for Les's asthma. And I'm really sorry I wasn't truthful about my mum and dad. But I'm their eldest daughter and I just feel that I need to protect my mum because I'm really frightened of what he's going to do to her one day. Have you ever been in a situation where you've been in a period of change and it's not quite worked out the way that you thought? I think that was the same for Bill. And actually Bill was so upset, in fact he was very angry with Jean, that he didn't speak to her for 6 whole weeks. Now, I met Jean in 1961, and indeed she was this lovely, pretty, bubbly lady with sparkly eyes, and she loved her family, and she loved her Jack Russell dogs, and she loved her gardening. That was her big passion. She was very warm, but there was a change that I witnessed in Jean. She at times became very withdrawn and very thoughtful and very sad. You see, over the period of the time that she was married to Bill, these periods of silence happened time and time and time again. Now, when I trained as a nurse many, many years ago, there was no reference to how illness was affected by what was going on in our mind or our situations. It was just a simple fact of, you had something, it was a symptom, it was diagnosed and you were given some sort of treatment. Would you agree that you're familiar with that? Yeah. But now that I work in the wellness industry, we look at things in a very different way. Now we look at the whole body, the mind, the body and the spirit. And Jean realised that that was what she needed to do. Because you see, by the time she got to the age of 50, she was mentally and physically suffering with a whole gamut of problems. She was suffering with high blood pressure and high cholesterol levels. She had repeated migraines. She had abdominal problems that were undiagnosed. She was very clinically depressed. She became anxious and agoraphobic, not able to leave her house some days. And at times she felt so desperate and so alone and so isolated that she wanted to take her own life. But the change came when she found a therapist that could make the link between the stress that Jean was undergoing in her marriage and her physical symptoms. And not only that, they also discovered that the reason for her abdominal pain was a massive ovarian cyst. So when she had this removed, you can imagine she felt a lot better. 3 weeks after this operation, she had to go back into hospital though to have a mole removed on her arm. It was cancerous. Now I know Bill, and Bill tells me this story that 2 days after this operation, he went to see her in hospital. And after visiting hours, Jean insisted on walking Bill out to the front doors of the hospital. And arm in arm, they would discuss how now that Jean's life seemed to be making a better turn, that they would vow to have a better time together. They would make some lifestyle changes in their marriage that would mean that Jean's health could stay well. For example, they discussed how, now that she could leave the house, that they would go and visit their 3 children more often. And they would also perhaps go back to dancing, which is what they used to do when they were young. And Bill vowed that he would allow Jean to have some friends, and that he would allow her to go and do her pursuits like painting and flower arranging. So it was a really positive moment for them, more positive than it had been in the long time of their marriage. And I'd like to tell you that that's how it worked out. But sadly not. Because you see, Bill made the 30-mile journey home and Jean walked back to her bed. But as she arrived, she collapsed. And despite the best efforts of the medical staff, they couldn't revive her. And she died. She died of a blood clot that travelled to her lung and killed her instantly. She was 56 years old.